You know what's scary? Making assumptions about your retirement. Today, we're going to talk about the nightmare retirement assumptions, the Trilogy. All right, grab your favorite mug. It's time for Coffee with Your Retirement Coach. All right, welcome back to Coffee with Your Retirement Coach. I'm Aaron, your host, and with me, as always, my coach behind the clipboard, the man with the game plan, Nic Yeomans.
Hey, buddy.
Listen, this is terrifying, and not just because we are in the Halloween month, but people make assumptions. They make assumptions in regards to spending power, inflation in retirement, tax obligations and liabilities in retirement, healthcare costs in retirement. And because of a lack of planning, because we make assumptions, we assume, which makes us unprepared.
Unprepared.
My mom watches this show. We need to do a better job about making sure that while we're able to make plans, make adjustments, put things together.
Yeah. You know, Aaron, I think today's episode is going to really empower people to be mindful and maybe a bit demure.
No.
All right. But they're definitely going to be mindful about the three things that, they're essentially landmines.
Yeah.
You didn't even see it. You didn't know to look for it. You stepped on it.
Yeah.
It's too late.
Yeah, and there's preparatory things you can do. And that's the thing. Is like we need time and awareness, and that's what we want to buy back today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought we'd start with mistake number one.
Yes.
Or assumption number one,
Yes.
really, right? We assume that our healthcare expenses are going to look like X and they're going to be covered a certain way.
That's right.
Right? And so, I pulled a few studies I thought were really interesting. Fidelity did a study this year, and they came out and they said a 65-year-old, again, they did not make it gender specific, but what they said is a 65-year-old retiring today can expect to spend approximately $172,500 on medical and healthcare related expenses over their lifetime.
Yeah.
I thought that was a lot, but not like too much. Like that wasn't really crazy. And then I found this. So there was another organization that put together a study that broke out males and females, and as healthy, okay, so they did qualify it, a healthy 65-year-old male retiring in 2024 will need approximately $281,000 over the course of their retirement life. Females would need approximately $320,000.
Wow.
Man, that's big. And so, I was sharing this with somebody and they said, well, why the discrepancy male-female? I said, well, simply they live longer.
Oh, 100%.
Right? I mean, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
They have a longer, they have a bigger, larger mortality table. So the big thing I want our audience to grasp is the healthcare living costs are a very real thing we need to address before entering that retirement phase of life.
Yeah.
However, just because you've already entered retirement doesn't mean that there aren't things you could do to better arrange or maybe even adjust what you've done so that you can go through that retirement phase of life addressing your health care. So don't feel like because you haven't done anything, you're 67, 68 years old, like you're stuck and it's too late.
Yeah.
Here's one thing that really does concern me. A lot of retirees today assume Medicare covers things that it doesn't.
Right.
That it's going to be an end-all, be-all. It's going to cover these multitudes of things that it doesn't, and then they get shocked. And so I thought I'd share, Aaron, story time. Story time. So we have story time with Bob and Sue.
This is a horror story.
This is a horror story. Bob and Sue, they expected that Medicare was going to cover most of their cost. Major surgery, drug cost. And here's the thing. Real life.
Yeah.
Multiple surgeries. Issues with their eyes, or his eyes specifically. So many things that went uncovered by Medicare, certain drugs that were no longer preferred by Medicare that he needed.
Yeah.
All of these things rapidly drained their retirement.
Sure.
This vision of getting healthy and going and doing things and traveling again and having these life experiences quickly went out the window.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Yeah.
And now they're stuck and they're down, well, I won't say exactly how much, but they're roughly 70% of their retirement savings is just based on healthcare costs. So don't assume that Medicare does things it doesn't do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one thing when you start thinking about pulling back on travel, or are we going to eat at home and not eat out? We don't want to skimp on our health care.
Yeah.
Yep.
And one thing I say, I know you've got some great action steps and takeaways for our audience today. If they're just thinking about what they should be working towards, because oftentimes that's a goal, whatever you think you might get or a Medicare might cover, start thinking double that.
Sure.
I mean, really start thinking whatever you think Medicare is going to cover over your lifetime, start thinking double that in terms of your need.
No, that's good advice. That's good advice. Nick, some things that I had here, just, it's a great idea to use one of the healthcare cost estimators. We want to include things like premium, out-of-pocket costs, long-term care, so that we've got a full picture. And again, long-term care can mean different things. Talk to your financial planner about that.
Yes.
Also, something great is to consider maximizing your HSA contributions at work. We've got a great episode where we really dove into depth. So it's funny that this is a trilogy here. That was also the triple threat of the HSA. You can look in the show notes. We definitely encourage you to watch that episode.
Yeah. Triple tax free.
Yeah. And then just review the long-term care options that you've got set out early. If it is a standalone policy, if it is a part of another insurance product, be aware of what you have, how it works. Stay on top of that.
And I love that you landed on that one, Aaron, because long-term care, like you just said, it can mean some different things. And so, if you're like many people today and you find that long-term care is really costly, you might not ever use it. They keep changing the premiums. Premiums keep going up and up and up. Here's the encouragement. There's a lot of different types of long-term care plans that exist today that didn't used to exist. There's alternative long-term care, hybrid long-term care. And, for some people, they want to fully insure. Some people can self-insure, but for many, many people, they're looking to partially insure that long-term care risk. So seek wise counsel on that.
Absolutely. Nick, everybody's fearful of taxes.
They're scary.
You got any tax assumptions?
Oh, yeah. You know what? Assuming that your tax bill is going to be lower in retirement, big mistake.
Yeah.
Big mistake. We've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of retirees, and it's almost unanimous, not unanimous, almost unanimous. They retire into the same or higher tax brackets.
Yeah.
They lose certain tax deductions and tax benefits. The standard deduction's high right now. We've got a few things like a bonus senior deduction. We have a few things that have come out of the ABBA, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that has been that's been good for retirees. Yeah. However, here's the big thing. We sometimes don't really factor in the fact that required minimum distributions, that element of forced taxation, you didn't need the money out of the retirement accounts, but the government makes you take it out.
Nick, I had a client retire this year at 73, right into required minimum distributions. So again, finished out the year where he's got some income where it overlapped, has to take RMDs this year. And then in his first year of retirement, he's hitting the grocery store and seeing the bill there rack up. So it's tough because so many of our retirees last year, this year, and coming up years thought it'll be so much, life will be cheaper in retirement. I'm going to spend less in retirement, and it's oftentimes not the case.
I mean, we've hit number one biggest, bill that you assume you wouldn't have, that healthcare bill, bigger than you expected. Yeah. Second that we're addressing now, the tax bill you did not expect in retirement. And one of, our challenges is that so many people come to us, Aaron, their financial advisor has never reviewed their tax return. Their CPA, in many of these clients, they've got amazing CPAs, but they're preparing their taxes, not giving proactive tax advice. So one of the rare things we see is a 3 to 5 year tax plan to strategically reduce your taxes.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. One of the safest and easiest ways to increase the return on someone's money is to cut their tax bill. And right now, when I look at all the data that's out there, the IRS shows a mix of income sources creates a surplus in your tax liability that seniors did not expect. This is IRS data.
Yeah.
This isn't like somebody made up a statistic.
Yeah.
It's out there. You can find it. Investment gains, Social Security, Roth conversions, required minimum distributions, all of these things, inheritances, they can increase your tax liability. And if you're losing some of the tax credits and deductions that you used to enjoy, be ready for a bigger tax bill.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Any horror story time with taxes?
Aaron? Story time. So I'm changing the names for privacy purposes.
Got to protect the innocent.
So here's the story of Linda versus, versus Carl. Okay, so Linda, she was surprised by her high tax bill from required distributions, not realizing the taxes that would happen on those RMDs. She just didn't think about it.
Yeah.
She knew she had to take them, but didn't work with her CPA, didn't work with her financial person to factor in what that tax impact was. Unfortunately, she was raised into higher brackets, and her Medicare premiums went up. Neither were things that she expected, and she started draining her travel fund money. And she said, at least I haven't got to my grandkids' money yet.
Wow.
Right? But that's real life. I mean, that is something that, people think about, they're dealing with. They just don't know how to respond to the taxes on their required distributions. Then there's Carl. So Carl is somebody that we've been working with for about the last 7 or 8 years. We put together a 5-year Roth conversion strategy. And in doing this, Aaron, he turned 73. He saved approximately $180,000. Like we did the calculations. He's saving about $180,000 in taxes because of that strategic Roth conversion we did over the last 7 years. Amazing, right? Yeah. So, but that's the power of planning and setting yourself up for success.
No, I love that. I love that. Nic, we did have a client that they recognized themselves in a story, and they said, if somebody else can learn from it, that's great, but also I like my made-up name better than my real name.
I heard that.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
That's so funny.
Listen, we've got some great actionable steps for this. Number one, how do we get ready for this? We want to make sure that we're aware of our income sources, which ones are responsible for those required minimum distributions that you were talking about. When is your required beginning date? So important. We want to know about investment gains, those things that show up on our 1099s every year. And we also want to be mindful of Social Security. And then if there is a taxation at that point, what are we susceptible to? Again, you've mentioned it before. These tax laws are written in pencil. We need to be making sure that we know, have an awareness, and be ready for some flexibility.
That's good.
We want to meet with a tax advisor that doesn't just do prep, but does planning. And we want to be mindful of planning for year-by-year tax brackets, knowing where we're at in the brackets, not just income, but capital gains and how it affects Medicare premiums. So very, very important. And we'd love for all of our clients, whether they do it or not, we'd love for everybody that's listening, explore Roth and Roth conversion, contributions, those kind of things. But explore Roth conversions and tax-efficient withdrawal strategies. We've done some great episodes on Roth conversion, same thing. Check the show notes. We'd love for you, if that's something that you've either been putting off or you've really been thinking about, but toes are right there on the edge, go give that episode a listen.
Yeah. Aaron, for our audience today, what I'd encourage you, if you have questions about Roth conversions, required minimum distributions, you want to know how some of those rules work, shoot us an email, connect@yourretirementcoach.com. We'd be happy to answer those questions, hopefully give you some good guidance so that you can, not make wrong assumptions. No, it's so easy to do.
That's good. And I'll tell you what's terrifying. I've turned into my dad.
Okay.
I came home.
I know your dad.
Yeah, he's a good man.
He's a
but
good
there was
man.
a lot of things that I was like, I will.
We only need one mic, though.
Never. We only need one mic. Well, I came home, and the footballer in my house is grazing, because that's what we call it when you've gone to the pantry and helped yourself, and dinner's right around the corner, on a bag of chips.
Right.
Which used to not bother me as much as now when a bag of chips is $6.
Yeah, right.
We want to talk about the terrifying situation of the erosion of our buying power, Nic. What kind of horrors around inflation, do we need to be mindful of?
Yeah, well, Aaron, unfortunately, we've got the bag. Yeah. I mean, the government basically said, here you go, and left us holding it.
Yeah.
Okay. And the challenge that we're facing today is that inflation is very, very real, and we went almost 2 decades where we forgot it was a thing.
Oh, in the early 2020s, it was like screaming into the wind trying to talk with people about inflation awareness.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you've got 2%, 3% mortgages, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, the flip side of that is CDs and money markets weren't paying anything. However, you had access to cheap money. Things were cheap. Eggs were cheap. Meat was cheap. Like, all these things, we forgot inflation is real.
Yep.
And now it's smacked us in the face the last couple of years, and especially for our seniors, our retirees. I mean, the things that they spend money on have inflated. They've outpaced anything that the average American is facing today. Yeah. Their healthcare costs, as an example, they've gone through the roof. Inflation is something that we can't afford not to assume is going to be there, looking at us in our face, and we've got to address it head on in our retirement plan. Because it's there. It's going to continue to be there. Yeah. Now, the Federal Reserve, they've been trying to combat inflation with, increasing interest rates, tightening monetary policy, all those types of things. So they're trying their best. But we also have tariffs coming into play. By definition, tariffs are inflationary. Right. We've got we've got supply chain issues. We've got supply and demand. We look at everything. Things are more expensive. You've got, what used to be a $15,000 to $20,000 truck is now $50,000. I mean, it is out of control, and it's not slowing. Well, they say it's slowing down, but So here's the deal.
Not where we'd like to see it.
We looked at a study by the NIRS, okay? This was a study done in 2024. 73% of Americans today, they say that inflation is a top concern for their retirement.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, that's good.
Yeah.
Now that we're aware of it, what are we going to do about it, right? We got to be thinking about that. Retiree income outside of Social Security is far less indexed or likely to be indexed to purchasing power, COLA, cost of living adjustments, we can see that in some pensions. We can see that in Social Security. However, inflation is still outpacing, the catch-ups that we're getting in our pensions and Social Securities. Right. We're still going backwards. And I looked, what is it, about a 2 to 3% increase, estimated again this year, so it could be different in our Social Security. But we start measuring things that our retirees are spending money on, and it's still between 5 and 7% increases. They're going backwards.
Yes.
Okay. So real dollars affecting real people. Aaron, would you be okay if we did story time?
Story time.
Story time. Okay.
Horror story time.
Horror story.
Horror story time.
Okay. All right. This is a story of Margaret. Margaret had a fixed budget that over the last 8 years has been destroyed by inflation. Mm-hmm. She had fixed income, Social Security, a pension that did not adjust, okay, CDs that at one time were paying a little higher, are paying a little higher right now, but they're still not enough to keep up with inflation.
Right.
And she has a fixed annuity that is the same exact amount each and every month. We love the dependability and predictability of it. It's just not going up over time, so every single year it loses money.
Right.
She's stuck, and we look at over the last 8 years, and she is barely getting by. In real life, she's looking like she's going to have to downsize. She's kept her nose clean. Yeah. She's done the right things. She's not leveraged. Yeah. She hasn't done anything crazy. She's not out buying new cars all the time or buying stuff. Like, she lives a very frugal and modest life. Yeah. She's your neighbor. She is the person literally down the street from you.
And her dollars have stayed the same. It's the buying power.
The buying power is destroying her.
Right.
And again, likely going to have to move. And we've seen that, out places like California. They can't afford to live there anymore.
Right.
And I'm not talking politics. I'm just talking the math of living there is too difficult for most people.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I want to stay away from politics and all that, right?
Fair.
But let's talk about Tom.
Equally scary, though.
One of the yeah. So, Tom, he started working with a financial professional, actually not us, but somebody else I know, trust, and he invested very wisely, okay? Again, very prudent, but he also invested to try to grow faster and stay ahead of inflation.
Yeah.
Okay. So he had more structure around, like his fixed income around things like TIPS, okay, Treasury inflation protectionary securities, and not recommending those to anybody. Seek wise counsel. Okay, may or may not be appropriate. Everything has risk.
Yeah.
But what I am saying is he was very mindful about his investment strategy because of his focus on inflation. And you can do that too. This is not limited to some people can do this. No, most people can do this. Just work with somebody who understands it.
No, Nic, that's so good. Just some key takeaways for this, some action steps. Building inflation hedging, such as the tips that Nic just mentioned, not to be confused with gratuities. I bonds, dividend growth stocks, and real estate. Being well diversified in those areas and being mindful of how that fits into your overall allocation is so important.
Well, and while we're not recommending or advising anybody to go out and purchase these things, if you were to look them up and Google and research, many times these are assets that fall under recommendations when you are being mindful in trying to keep up with or keep ahead of inflation. So again, not a recommendation. Seek wise counsel. That's our CYA of the day.
Absolutely. Nic, we had mentioned that earlier in the 2000s, it was hard to get people to even talk about planning for inflation, and even then, trying to say, "Hey, we need to think about this." 2 or 3% was difficult to get people to add into their planning numbers, but even that's really not aggressive enough. Really, when we're talking about our ratio and we're considering inflation, 4 to 5% is really more of a sweet spot to really be doing effective planning at this moment, correct?
Yeah. You're hitting the nail on the head. And I think we can't be so rigid that we can't change numbers. But if we are looking at historical norms, which are around 3.5 to 4% inflation, like historical averages, why would we use 2% as our factor, or as many people want 1%? Because, I'm not going to travel that much. I'm not going to really change my life. I already have a ranch condo. I've already done blah, 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 right? So we have a lot of folks that have this mentality that, inflation's really still not going to impact me that much. And then, unfortunately, the last couple of years, they've gotten punched.
Yeah.
So I think for our folks, our audience today that are looking at retiring in the next couple of years, start factoring in those higher numbers you're talking about, and you'll be better suited for success.
Yeah. And there's a big difference between I've got a part-time job, I've got a part-time hustle, or I've picked up something, and it's because of passion or community, as opposed to this is something I have to do if I want to maintain the lifestyle that I was expecting because of inflation.
100%.
Nic, the last thing I think that's really important is it's not fun. It's almost like doing the laundry, checking in on that budget, really looking at where we're at every 1 to 2 years. Our retirement budget needs to be looked at, assessed, and possibly adjusted.
Yeah. And, and I think being dynamic, coming back to don't be rigid, be dynamic.
Yeah.
Being able to understand that flexibility is okay. Having options, that's okay.
Yeah.
Having different pools of money for different periods of time, not investing all of your money in one way and crossing your fingers hoping it works out. No, let's be intentional. Let's have some money for now, later, and future. Invest it differently, keeping in mind healthcare costs are going to go up. Taxes are probably going to go up or at least stay the same for you.
Yeah.
And we've got to take into account the silent killer of inflation.
No, it's so
if our investors...
Anyway, sorry. I'm getting way into this horror movie thing.
You
I'm
really
sorry.
are. You really are. I was scared for a minute.
You said that silent killer. I almost amped up. Yeah.
If we really are mindful and very intentional about the healthcare costs, taxes, and inflation, and we design a plan that allows for us to stay ahead of those expenses. You're not going to do it perfect. It might be a little messy, but you've got direction and you are being very intentional about it.
Yeah.
You're really setting yourself up for success.
No, I love that. Hey, guys, and like Nic said, these are 3 areas we do not want to make assumptions in. We don't want to just hope for the best. Hope is not a plan. We want to make sure that we investigate, have dynamic investigations, get in there, get into the weeds, and be flexible. And some of you might be surprised. You might meet with your financial planner and them say, we're already doing this. or you might find an area that could use some critique, some observation, and some adjustment. As always, if you would like to take a deeper dive with us, if you've got a question that you want to get in front of one of the coaches, you're going to hit us up at connect@yourretirementcoach.com. But we want to thank you in the meantime for being here, even though it's a little scary. But what's even scarier is not being coachable. So we want to encourage you to stay coachable. We hope you enjoyed today's show, but you may have questions for our coaches, and they can be emailed at connect@yourretirementcoach.com. If you know someone that needs to hear this episode, we encourage you to share it. As a reminder, the content of this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as advice. On behalf of our coaches, we want to thank you for listening and for being coachable.
Yeoman's Consulting Group, a registered investment advisor YouTube channel based in Marietta, Georgia. We strive to provide comprehensive wealth management services for every stage of the journey. This platform is solely for informational purposes and is not offering advisory services or sales of securities. Investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Comments by viewers or recognitions are no guarantee of future investment outcomes and do not ensure that a viewer will experience a higher level of performance or results. Public comments posted on this site are not selected, amended, deleted, or sorted in any way. If applicable, certain editing of personal, identifiable information and misinformation may be deleted. The opinions expressed herein are as of the date of publication and are subject to revision due to changes in the market or economic conditions and may not necessarily come to pass.